and welcome back to my channel. It's time for the annual book sale haul because this is the time of the year where the foreign bookstore in Tokyo, Kinokuniya, has their annual 60% book sale. So these are books that typically have a little bit of damage to them or some imperfections to them, and so they didn't feel they could sell them at full price, so they're at 60% off. So it's a major deal in the foreigners living in Japan world because it's our time to get affordable books here. Now, to be honest, the affordability has gone down because the import price now is so high. Last time, basically, I went to the bookstore because I wanted to buy a new nonfiction book. I wanted to buy Barbara Dimick's new nonfiction. I mean, I love Barbara Dimick's works. She's fantastic. I trust everything she writes. Her new book was coming. I've been anticipating it for a year. And then I went to pick it up. Well, there were other issues that made me not pick it up. But the main big issue was that it was 4,000 yen. So 4,000 yen, if you use the US dollars exchange rate, it's probably around, I don't know, I don't have a, you know what, no, I have my computer in front of me, and let me look what that is. 4,000 yen to US dollars, $27 for a book, okay? Which even in US dollars, that's expensive. But the thing is that I'm not buying the book in American dollars, I'm buying the book in yen. So 4,000 yen is the equivalent of you guys buying a book for $40. So I'm not gonna buy a book for the equivalent of $40, it's just not gonna happen. So the 60% off price, while it's fantastic, it does mean that the books are now at just a regular price. So if a book is $16 in the US, well, with the 60%, that's basically what I'm paying now. Basically a $16 book. So this year I had to be a lot more selective and not go as crazy. So let me tell you what I ended up getting. So my French TBR is quite packed, so I only ended up getting 2 books in French. I decided to get a thriller by Natsuo Kirino. I got the book Le Vrai Monde, so The Real World. This is an author that I have read twice before and enjoyed her works. And I just thought it was a good time to pick something new from her. I mean, this is not a new book, but new for me. I do like reading a thriller on occasion, and if I do pick one, it does end up typically it will typically be a Japanese thriller versus a thriller from another country. But yeah, I just thought it'd be nice. I guess maybe the summer mood made me want to read something more fast-paced, high tension, and see what happens there. Then I also got a Korean book. I got a book called La langue et le couteau, so the tongue and the knife, by Kwon Jeong-hyun. This is a book about the Japanese occupation in Manchuria. You guys know what I'm trying to say. It's not going to come to me. I'm not getting the syllables right in my head. But in any case, this is I thought it would be interesting to get a Korean's point of view on the Japanese army, not in Korea but somewhere else. Because the thing is that Korea and Japan, very high tension between the two countries, especially when it comes to the Japanese occupation. And I've read a lot about this topic, but from the Japanese point of view and from the Chinese point of view, and also from like Americans who have written about this time period. And I'm curious to see the bias. I think the Korean bias will be quite strong for a good reason. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I just wanted to see like how a Korean would approach this topic. So I'm really interested about this one. We'll see how it goes. Now, to be honest, I haven't liked Korean literature that much. What I've read very little bit of it, but what I have read, I haven't been too enamored with what I've read. But historical fiction tends to hit a little better. So for example, like Hong Kong's The Vegetarian, I absolutely hated that book. But her historical fiction, Human Acts, I really, really enjoyed. So I think because this is historical fiction, it'll go a little easier for me. So then I went for the English language books. And this is where I really, really pulled back and decided, okay, we're only going to get books that we are pretty certain about. So I got some pretty classic authors just to sort of fill in the gaps. I got some Tanizaki because I realized I haven't read Tanizaki in a while, and I got some Prefer Nettles, also because this is one of his most famous books, and I actually have not read this one, surprisingly enough. So I figured this one I couldn't really go wrong with. So got that, very exciting. Also, I got Natsume Soseki's Botchan. Soseki is author, and also an author that, surprisingly enough, I've actually only read one work from him. I've only read his work, Sorekara and Then, which was absolutely fantastic. But even that book, I would need to reread because I remember nothing about it, other than the fact that I really enjoyed it. And yeah, Soseki is, for whatever reason, is an author that I never actually revisited. Maybe because I felt like I should reread Sorekara first. But Botchan is I mean, Soseki is so famous, and Botchan is equally as famous. So I just felt that this was a sure thing, and I needed to pick it up because it's silly that I haven't read more Soseki. It really is silly. Then I'm continuing my Edogawa Rampo phase. This will be the third book that I read by him, and the longest one. This is the book The Gold Mask. So Edogawa Rampo is all about, it's just pure detective fiction with his famous character, Detective Kogoro. And I've enjoyed what I've read by him so far. I think he's really fantastic with like this dark atmosphere with great tension, really great suspense, has a very classical feel to it just because of the time periods it is written in, but that classical feel is exactly what I love because it makes me feel like it's the summer and I'm on vacation in France with my grandfather and we're watching old French thrillers on TV, or American thrillers but dubbed in French. So that's just kind of like the feel I get from his books. But at the same time, he's still very dark, very noir, very, very on the edge of almost gore, really. So really have enjoyed his work so far. And this is really, really fantastic book cover. I really love this one, so I got that. The last of the books from Japanese authors in English translation that I got was this book called Nipponia, Nippon by Kazushige Abe. I have not read this author before, but this is the book that he won the Akutagawa Prize with. And it was a book I wasn't too sure if... I wasn't so interested in it to read in Japanese, if that makes sense. My reading pace in Japanese is a lot slower, so it takes a lot more time. So with the plot of this book, I wasn't sure if I wanted to spend so much time with it. So I decided it might be better if I just read it in English so I can just sort of like just ride the pace of the book and see how I feel about it, because it has a very strange premise to it. So I haven't really talked to you about any of the blurbs about these books, but I will once I read them, of course. But this one is about, so it says it's a 17-year-old who spends all his waking hours online, fixated on the endangered Japanese crested ibis, the Nipponia Nippon. Isolated in his Tokyo apartment, living off his parents' indulgence, he descends into a fantasy world where he alone shares a bond with the last of these noble birds. And it becomes a question of him wanting to free the birds, but does he free them by releasing them, or does he free them by killing them? So it's a very dark novel. It has very strange reviews, this book. So again, I figured I'd just tackle it in English and see how I feel, because this was one of those Akutagawa Prize winners I was really, really unsure about. So I got this. And then 2 more books from the book haul. I ended up getting We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I have not read Shirley Jackson since middle school, where we read The Lottery. And that story, like anybody else who has read her works, has stuck on my mind ever since. And I know that I have this tendency of reading one work by an author, really loving it, and then never reading anything else by them again, aka the Soseki that I just mentioned. So when I saw this, I thought this was a great opportunity to pick up one of her works again and see how I feel, especially considering the fact that Lottery, although incredibly poignant and devastating and haunting and impactful and power punching, I don't know if that's a word, power punching, but I'm making it a word. It's still a short story. So I'm interested to see her in the longer form, and I do love a very good novella. So I'm excited about this one, and this is also a cover I think is very, very lovely. These green penguins, which I believe is their thriller series, I think they're really, really good. I think this is a great collection to have. I would need to read more thrillers and classic thrillers, but just in the ones I picked up, I think it's a really great series to have. Then I grabbed one nonfiction, which is a book that I have heard about it. I believe I saw one YouTuber. I wouldn't be able to say who it is, since I don't actually formally subscribe to them, since we have very different reading tastes, but it just happened the one of several videos that I saw them, they did have one book that appealed to me. And they had it there, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that book, and I thought I would try it myself. And that book is called The Color of Law, The Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. This book is basically about the government using urban planning to segregate the black communities from the white communities, which basically just remapped America to create poor communities versus rich communities, and basically has created an America where blacks are always being forced into lower education, lower income, lower effort, lower priority neighborhoods. So I thought this book would be very fascinating and extremely poignant and really informative in terms of current issues. So I really thought this sounded so good, and I made the effort to actually flip through it in the bookstore to make sure that it didn't feel too academic, and that it was quite readable. So I think this will be very, very interesting. So there you go. Those are the books I picked up. Let me tell you though real quickly the books that I left behind, because typically what I do is it's a madhouse. This was the first weekend day of the sale out of the 2 weeks that the sale goes on. So there were a lot of people, and so my technique is just to grab all the books that sound familiar, or I know the author, or were just in good condition, looked appealing, grab all of them without really reading the blurbs, then go into a corner, actually read the blurbs, and sort through there. So let me tell you the books that I left behind. And that was actually mostly Penguin Classic books. I just wasn't sure. Like the blurbs would be interesting, but these were pretty much authors that I hadn't read from, and so I just really wasn't. I couldn't get a grasp as to how I would end up feeling if I read these books. So I gave up on Chekhov's The Shooting Party, which that one was the most interesting. It was the one that I was on my yes pile the longest before it hit the maybe pile, and then before it hit the reject pile. But I was confused because the blurb said it's Chekhov's only full-length novel. And so it made me think, wait, do I even know what Chekhov writes? Is he a poetry person? Is he more a short person? Is he more an essayist? I mean, Chekhov is a very, very famous name in Russian literature. I know that. But I just always assumed he was a full-on like Dostoevsky type author or Tolstoy type author. I always assumed he had these really full novels. So I realized I wanted to look him up a little bit more before committing to one of his books, I guess. Then I also gave up on Rob Roy by Sir Walter Scott. Rob Roy is a movie that I thought was excellent when I grew up, but the blurb on the book was so different. And obviously it's not like, oh, I've seen the movie, I won't read the book, or I've read the book, so I won't see the movie. I'm not like that, but for some reason, the disconnect between the two was just a little bit confusing. And so I decided to just, maybe later, maybe another time. I also gave up on E.M. Forster's The Longest Journey. I think if I am going to read E.M. Forster, I believe there's another book by him that I have my eye on, and I think I want to tackle that one first before I do this one. Because again, I couldn't get a good feel of what kind of book it was. I also decided to get to leave behind The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I know I did pick up a Shirley Jackson, but I made that decision because The Haunting of Hill House is a story I'm already very well familiar with, and I've already seen many adaptations of it. And I decided that I wanted something new that I was not familiar at all, rather than something I was already quite familiar with. So The Haunting of Hill House, it's not a book that I'll never read, but I think I just want to read something else by her before I do that one. Then I also gave up All My Sons by Arthur Miller. I am on a big French play kick. That's the word I'm looking for, kick. And I thought maybe it'd be interesting to read an American play. I realized I actually am not familiar. I mean, although the titles of American plays I'm very familiar with, and even sort of the plot of a lot of these plays, I've never actually read them. I never took an American play course, and it was not a focus in any of my English lit courses growing up in the U.S. But I decided that for Arthur Miller, rather than All My Sons, I'd rather read his other more famous play first, and so I gave that one up. I also ended up getting rid of Up at the Villa by Somerset Maugham. Somerset Maugham is an author I've also have never read from. And actually, Up at the Villa was the book that I was most interested in out of probably all of these rejects. However, the font of that book, this book was published by Vintage Classics, and I typically like Vintage Classics. The Tanizaki that I have is a Vintage Classic, but the font of it was awful. Like this one, the Tanizaki, the font is very appropriate from its size, but I think the Up at the Villa by Somerset Maugham it's a novella, but it's a very short novella, and so to make it take up more space, they really upped the font. It's about twice the size of this font, and they made the borders, the margins, a lot larger, and it just felt like I was like usually I read a book here, but I felt for that one, for the font, I would have to read it here because it's so big, and it just seemed like it'd be a very uncomfortable read. So I actually gave up on that one because of the font size. That's a book I'd be interested in picking up if I can find another edition of. I really just didn't like that. There was another book, there was actually another book that I also gave up because of the font size. Oh, right. So out of the Japanese books in English, I was interested in picking up Solo Dance by Lee Kotomi. Solo Dance was a book that also won the Edogawa Prize. And that's a book I kind of wanted to avoid. I was avoiding mostly because of its plot, but like the plot wasn't super interesting to me, but I am still trying to read the Edogawa Prize winners, and the themes of the book are actually very they're very important to current society, and I felt like that was even if I was interested in the plot itself, I thought the themes would be interesting enough for me to tackle and for me to explore. But again, the font choice on that book was I just hated it. Also, it was a very thick book in terms of when it's thick and it's not soft opening. It was very like compact, thick, like the opposite of the floppy books. I can't think of the word thick is stuck in my head. Stiff. There we go. Thank you. Stiff. It was a very stiff book, which made it uncomfortable. Also, the font choice again was off. The font was really big. Again, the margins were huge, and it was just like, well, I'd have to read it up here, and then it's not possible because of the stiffness of the book. It wouldn't be possible to hold with one hand. So I actually got rid of that just because of the formatting of the book. I just really didn't like it. I also originally picked up another two mystery books by Japanese authors. I had picked up The Devil's Flute Murders by Seishi Yokomizo. Yokomizo is an author that I've read before several times, and I actually really, really enjoy his books. But kind of reading through, like flipping through the pages, I realized I liked his French translated voice better than his English translated voice. So I think I'm going to stick to French translations of this author just because it feels more comfortable for me. And then the last book that I had considered was The Labyrinth House Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji. And this book I just left behind because I just came to think that, okay, there are way too many thrillers / mysteries in my basket already, and it's not really a genre I visit that often. So it would be a little silly to stock up on too many of those books because I just read them on such rare occasions. So since I already have one with the Edogawa Rampo, I have the thriller by Natsuo Kirino, and then I still have a few more mystery thriller books on my TBR already. I decided I had enough and I didn't need to stock up anymore. Again, as I said, the price is such that these books are now the price of a new book if I were to buy them in the US. I just figured I needed to be a lot more selective and a lot more careful with what I actually pick up. So there you go. That was my adventure at the English annual book sale. I am going to, by the time you see this, I'll be on vacation, or actually my vacation will be over probably by the time you see this video. But I will be in France, so there's always the chance that I pick up more books there. Although, again, my French TBR pile is quite big, so I don't know how many books I want to buy, but I usually come back with something, so we'll see what happens. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in my next video. Bye.